It was a peaceful Saturday morning in Maplewood Estates. Birds chirping, lawnmowers humming, and my orange tabby, Mr. Whiskers, proudly patrolling his favorite sidewalk. Everyone in the neighborhood adored him, except one person. Her name was Karen Murdoch, the self-proclaimed vice president of the HOA. She wore her authority like a badge of honor, and by badge, I mean a laminated ID she printed herself and clipped to her pastel cardigan. That morning, I was trimming my hedges when Karen stormed up the street, clutching her phone like it was evidence from a crime scene. "Excuse me," she barked. "Is this your cat?" She pointed to Mr. Whiskers, who was sitting innocently on the curb licking his paw. I nodded. "Yeah, that's mine. Why?" Karen gasped like I'd confessed to arson. "Your cat was on my property." "Again! That's trespassing! HOA policy clearly forbids." I couldn't help but laugh. "He's a cat, Karen. He doesn't know what property lines are." She crossed her arms. "Ignorance is no excuse. I've already filed a formal complaint with the HOA board. I have video proof." She waved her phone in my face. On it, a shaky clip showed Mr. Whiskers sitting on her front porch like a king on his throne. The caption read, "Neighbor's cat invades private property again." "Karen," I sighed, "that's ridiculous. He probably just wandered over for some sun." "Rules are rules," she said sharply. "If you can't control your animal, I'll have to call animal control." At that point, half the neighborhood had gathered to watch. Even old Mr. Jenkins was chuckling from his porch. Karen huffed, realizing no one was taking her side. She stormed off, shouting, "This isn't over!" As I watched her march away, a funny idea started forming in my head. If she wanted to act like the HOA was the police, maybe I'd play along. That night, I sat at my desk designing something truly special, a shiny little HOA patrol badge for Mr. Whiskers. It had his name, a fake serial number, and the words Neighborhood Watch, Feline Division. When I clipped it onto his tiny harness the next morning, Mr. Whiskers looked proud, like he finally got promoted. I grinned. "All right, Officer Whiskers, let's go patrol Karen's property." And just like that, the war between Karen and my cat officially began. The next morning, the sun was barely up when Officer Whiskers began his patrol. I clipped on his tiny badge, adjusted his blue harness, and handed him his official HOA clipboard, a mini plastic board with a tiny pencil taped to it. He strutted down the sidewalk with the confidence of a detective in a crime drama. The neighbors burst out laughing when they saw him. Even Mrs. Lopez from across the street took a photo, saying, "Oh my goodness, Karen's gonna love this." Love was definitely not the word. By mid-morning, Karen emerged from her driveway wearing her usual visor, gloves, and her HOA binder of doom. When her eyes landed on Whiskers, she froze. "What is that?" she demanded, pointing as if she'd seen a ghost. I walked up behind my cat, holding a coffee mug that said, "Best HOA Dad." "Meet Officer Whiskers," I said casually. "He's here to ensure all neighborhood lawns meet regulation standards." Her jaw dropped. "You're mocking the HOA." I smiled innocently. "Mocking? No. I'm supporting the HOA. You said my cat needs to follow the rules, so now he's enforcing them." Karen's face turned a shade of red I didn't think was humanly possible. "That is not funny. Animals cannot be members of the association. According to Section 4B of your own handbook," I said, flipping open a printed copy, "all residents and their dependents are subject to HOA participation. Mr. Whiskers lives here, therefore he qualifies." The crowd that had gathered, again, burst out laughing. Mr. Whiskers sat by, Karen's mailbox meowing proudly, as if issuing her a citation. Karen stomped her foot. "This is harassment! I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting." By the afternoon, she'd done exactly that. Flyers appeared on everyone's door. Urgent HO meeting, pet misconduct and neighborhood decorum. I couldn't believe it. She was taking this seriously. That evening, a dozen residents gathered in the clubhouse. Karen stood at the podium like a courtroom judge, pointing to a slide labeled "Feline Trespasser turned Fraudulent Officer." "His badge is fake," she declared. "He's impersonating an HOA official." I raised my hand. Actually, I designed it myself. "You're welcome." The room erupted in laughter again. Even the HOA president, Mr. Dalton, had to cover his mouth to keep from smiling. Karen looked around in disbelief. "You're all encouraging this nonsense?" "Honestly," said Mr. Dalton, "it's the most entertainment we've had in months." By the end of the meeting, the board ruled that no further action was necessary, except to maybe give Whiskers a treat for community morale. Karen was fuming. She stormed out muttering, "Just wait. I'll find something he's really guilty of." I petted Whiskers on my lap and whispered, "Brace yourself, partner. I think our next mission's coming." The next few days in Maplewood Estates were suspiciously quiet. Too quiet. Karen hadn't been seen patrolling, lecturing, or waving her HOA handbook at anyone. That silence only meant one thing. She was planning something. Meanwhile, Officer Whiskers had become a local celebrity. Kids waved at him, neighbors took selfies, and someone even made a Whiskers for HOA president meme on the community Facebook page. But on Thursday morning, trouble returned, wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a clipboard thicker than a phone book. Karen marched toward my house like a woman on a mission. Behind her followed 2 HOA members, clearly dragged there against their will. "Mr. Johnson," she said with fake politeness, "we're here to discuss multiple new violations." I leaned against the fence. "Oh, really?" "Let's hear them." Karen flipped open her notes dramatically. Violation 14C, unauthorized animal activity. Violation 22A, property disturbance due to costume usage. And, she squinted, Violation 31B, encouraging residents to mock the HOA. I grinned. "That's not a rule, Karen." She glared. "It should be." Then she turned her phone around, showing me a new video. It was Whiskers sitting on top of her car, staring through her windshield like he was on a stakeout. "See? He's watching me." "That's intimidation!" I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. "Karen, he's a cat. He's watching a bird reflection in your glass." She ignored me, spinning toward the HOA witnesses. "Do you all see what I deal with? This man has turned his pet into a menace!" One of the board members, Mr. Patel, tried to hide a chuckle. "Karen, maybe you're overreacting a little." "Overreacting?" she shrieked. "He has a badge." At that exact moment, Whiskers sauntered out from behind the bush, wearing his shiny badge and dragging a tiny toy walkie-talkie by its string. The timing was perfect. The witnesses couldn't hold it in. They burst out laughing. Even Mr. Patel pulled out his phone and took a photo. Karen was fuming, her face twitching with rage. "This isn't a joke!" "I'll take this to animal control." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "But just so you know, Whiskers' paperwork is in order." She froze. "Paperwork?" I nodded and held up a small folder labeled Official HOA Feline Operations. Inside was a fake ID card, training certificate, and even a photo of Whiskers on patrol, signed by Mr. Jenkins from across the street. The witnesses lost it. Karen snatched the papers and stomped off shouting, "This neighborhood has gone insane!" That night, our neighborhood group chat exploded with laughter and memes of Karen versus cat. One message even said, "Petition to make Officer Whiskers the official HOA mascot." And while the whole community laughed, I had a feeling Karen was far from done. Because when she got embarrassed, she didn't quit, she escalated. It all came to a head the following weekend. Karen had been quiet for 3 days, which, in Karen time, meant something big was brewing. Saturday morning, I stepped outside with my coffee and found a bright orange notice taped to my door. Notice of HOA violation, unauthorized creation of fraudulent identification, misuse of HOA insignia, and disorderly conduct by a house pet. I almost spit out my drink. She had actually written up my cat. As I was laughing, I heard a familiar, angry voice echo down the street. Karen was marching toward me in full official attire, blazer, clipboard, and a whistle hanging around her neck like she was leading a parade. Behind her came animal control. Yup, she'd really done it. The 2 officers looked as uncomfortable as you'd expect. Ma'am," one said to Karen, "we received a report about a cat acting as a law enforcement officer." Karen nodded firmly. "Yes, he's impersonating authority, trespassing, and undermining HOA credibility." The officer turned to me, trying not to smile. "Sir, is this true?" I bent down and picked up Whiskers, who was sitting proudly on the sidewalk wearing his tiny badge. "Officer, my cat's just doing his job." Karen threw her hands in the air. "See? He's admitting it." The other animal control officer crouched to pet Whiskers, chuckling. "This is the calmest criminal I've ever met." The crowd began forming again. Same neighbors as before, all waiting for round 4 of the neighborhood comedy show. Karen, realizing people were laughing, doubled down. "I demand that badge be confiscated immediately." That's when Mr. Dalton, the HOA president, appeared from his porch with a grin. "Actually, Karen," he said, holding up a paper, "the board met last night. We decided to make Officer Whiskers an honorary mascot for the community." The crowd cheered. Someone even shouted, "All hail Officer Whiskers!" Karen's mouth dropped open. "You can't be serious." "Oh, we are," Dalton said. "His patrols have boosted neighborhood morale and, technically, he hasn't broken any written rule." Karen was speechless, her clipboard trembling in her hand. "You people have lost your minds!" The animal control officer smiled politely. "Ma'am, unless this cat starts writing parking tickets, we're good here." Karen let out a frustrated growl and stormed off toward her house, muttering about moving to a sane neighborhood. The moment she was gone, the entire street erupted in applause. Kids ran up to pet Whiskers and someone handed me a small trophy that read, "For services to the community, Officer Whiskers, HOA legend." I looked down at my furry partner. He blinked up at me, tail flicking proudly. "Well, buddy," I said, scratching behind his ear, "case closed." That evening, the neighborhood had a mini celebration. Barbecue, laughter, and a few mock citations, written by Whiskers himself, with paw prints as signatures. And from that day on, whenever Karen stepped,